Ilu ilu otzianu mi Mitzrayim otzianu mi Mitzrayim dayenu 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 dayenu. It's a little bit of a silly song. I mean, we sing it in a silly way. It's a song for children. It's an upbeat, peppy song that we sing right at the end of the Magid portion of the Seder. It's fun. But what is the true meaning of Dayenu? This week I got into a bit of a fracas on Facebook. I try to avoid those, but this time it found me. About cultural appropriation. It all started when a colleague of mine, the Reverend Amawi, who is the new executive director of Schenectady Community Ministries, SICM, posted an article about the importance of Christian consciousness around anti-Semitism and the use of the Good Friday liturgy as a tool of anti-Semites. The article was about how the selection from John that is read as part of the Good Friday liturgy has been used for centuries to rile up crowds with anti-Jewish sentiment and has been coupled with blood libels, the insidious myth about Jews baking matzah with the blood of Christian babies, and other vile lies that have increased anti-Semitism. The passage from John that I'm referring to, of course, is the passage in which John blames the Jews for the killing of Jesus, for his crucifixion. So that was the context. The first comment on that article was a well-meaning Christian reverend from Providence who wrote that she taught Dayenu to her kids' service as part of children's time at her church service last Sunday. Well, I don't know how that makes you feel, to know that there are a bunch of Christian kids who sang Dayenu as part of their church service. But it made me feel a little uncomfortable. So I sent her a private message, and I said, you know what? It feels a little like cultural appropriation to use this song, which I called a prayer, to use this prayer, which is part of our liturgy, Jewish liturgy, as if it were just a kid's song, and that you could use it in your Christian worship. Well, I began by singing Dayenu, and it is a funny song. I mean, it's upbeat. It's not, it doesn't have that same gravity or seriousness. After I sent that to her as a private message, she responded to me in public on the Facebook page, and she said to me that my intolerance and my unwelcomingness, which about music, which she called a universal language, was really problematic. And I said, the issue here is not about music. Yes, it's sung to a silly tune. I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm saying that it is not just a song, it is a prayer as part of a liturgy. That liturgy is called the Haggadah. And our Haggadah is a specifically Jewish ritual that we do with all kinds of ritual components, and Dayenu is a part of that ritual. So then she said, I've been to lots of Seders, and by the time we get to Dayenu, people are generally well liquored up. So I responded, the presence of wine at the Seder, even the presence of inebriation at the Seder, does not change the fact that Dayenu is a serious prayer. And I'm asking you to believe me when I say that you're using it in the context of a juvenile service and without the context of the Passover Seder is an example of cultural appropriation and probably anti-Semitic. And she then said to me, this is why people hate the Jews, and also I hate Israel. So it took, 48 hours or so for her to get from, how dare you tell me what to do, this is just a song, to, yeah, by the way, everything you stand for, I don't agree with, and you're a terrible person. Also, she attacked me for being conservative Jewish. I am not telling you the whole story. I reported her to Facebook, and that post is taken down. I reported it as hate speech. But it got me thinking about what Dayenu really means. Because it is also true that by the time we get to Dayenu at the Seder, a lot of us are hungry. A lot of us like the upbeat peppiness of it because it means that we're at the end of the Magid. We've just spent an hour or more telling the story, and we've gotten to this point, and we're ready to eat dinner. So we treat it also with a degree of levity, a degree of lightness. But what does Dayenu really mean? Dayenu has 15 verses. I don't know if you've ever counted them, but that's how many there are. And that's not an accident. There are 15 verses of Dayenu, just like there are 15 steps in the Seder. I don't know if you've counted them either, but there are 15. And both of those 15s correspond to the fact that there were 15 steps leading up to the Temple Mount. You can still walk on those 15 steps on the southern side of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Levites used to sing beautiful hymns on those 15 steps, and we still have some of them. They are contained in the book of Psalms. There are 15 of them, and they're called Shir Lamalot, songs of ascent. And those songs of ascent were as you were going up to the temple. The last verse of Dayenu is about the temple. It's, if only God had taken us out of Egypt, that would have been enough. If only God had split the sea, that would have been enough. If only God had done the plagues, that would have been enough. But finally, the last one is, if only God had brought us to Jerusalem so that we could build the holy temple and therefore atone for our sins and be in relationship with God, it would have been enough. The reason why there are 15 verses of Dayenu is to remind us that the last one is significant, that the last one is the temple focused. By the way, there are 15 steps in the Seder for the same reason. The final step of the Seder is Nirtzah, which is the 15th step, and the main liturgy of the 15th step is Lishana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. The Seder creates this idea of rising up, of going one step, and then another step, and then another step, up to a pinnacle, which is redemption. It's not just a song, even if we sing it to a peppy, juvenile tune. It is a part of our serious liturgy. In the context of the Seder, Dayenu is the song that we sing when the people cross the Sea of Reeds. We don't make that always 100% explicit in the Haggadah, because the Haggadah doesn't focus on the crossing of the sea. The Haggadah is focused on the events of 7 days previous, when they're really leaving Egypt in the middle of the night. But if you read closely, Dayenu actually comes to represent the Song of the Sea. And some Haggadot also contain the Song of the Sea, and it's right there, right next to Dayenu. So today is the 7th day of Pesach, and we read the Song of the Sea. And there's a verse at the beginning of the song, right before the people cross, where the people turn to God and they say, "Now what? The army of Pharaoh is behind us. There's a sea in front of us. It's better that we would have been slaves in Egypt than die here." And God says, "What are you waiting for? Just go." And there's a midrash at that exact moment that describes Nachshon ben Aminadav, the prince of the tribe of Judah, also the brother-in-law of Aaron, the high priest, who walks into the water before it splits. He walks into the sea, and everybody turns to him and says, "Nachshon, what are you doing?" And Nachshon says, "I'm going forward." And he walks up to his knees, and nothing happens, and everybody shouts at him, "What are you doing?" And he walks up to his waist, and he walks up to his neck, and he keeps walking, and he keeps walking, and now the water is at his nose. And it's at that moment, says the Midrash, that God splits the sea. God splits the sea. God brings across that redemption only when people start taking steps toward that redemption. Nachshon's story is a story about the importance of being partners with God in our own redemption, not just waiting for God to come and save us, but actively taking a role in that salvation. The Passover Haggadah is the story of the Exodus from Egypt, but really, more deeply, it's the story of us telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt. It's about seeing ourselves in the story. And to me, I think what's so powerful about Dayenu is that it's actually incorrect, or it's supposed to make you really think. It wouldn't have been enough if God had just taken us out of Egypt. We say Dayenu, it would have been enough, but we know it wouldn't have been. And it wouldn't have been enough if God had just done the plagues. And it wouldn't have been enough if God just split the sea. And it wouldn't have been enough if God just gave us the Shabbat. And it wouldn't have been enough if God just gave us the Torah. It wouldn't have been enough. It's not enough. Dayenu is about reminding us that we have to participate in our redemption, that we, like Nachshon, have to take steps into the sea. It's not easy, but it is necessary. Bringing redemption is a responsibility of all of us, not just of God. I think about this a lot with our work to try to understand our own relationship as a privileged minority. What really affected me about this example on Facebook this week, about this fight that I got into, was it was the first time in a while that I had really felt marginalized, where I really felt like my point of view wasn't respected. But we have to be aware of the fact that there are people who feel that sense of marginalization every day in our communities. Whether they are Asian Jews who spoke out a few weeks ago after the brutal murder of 8 Asian women in Atlanta, who spoke out strongly about the way in which they never really felt included in the white Jewish community of the United States of America. Whether it's Jews of color, people of color in our broader community. This week we observed Trans Day of Visibility on Wednesday, and we also have to be aware that often in our communities, LGBTQ and trans people feel marginalized and not listened to, feel that their point of view is not reflected in the broader point of view. There's a reason why this story, the story of the Exodus from Egypt, is so important to our foundational ethos as the Jewish people, and it is because we were a minority, and so we understand what it is to be a minority, and we have to be working towards justice and uplifting every minority group. Well, I was reminded what it felt like to be marginalized this week, and it was not a good feeling. But I was also reminded what it was like to be supported this week, because as I spent time responding to this person on Facebook, other voices chimed in. People I didn't know and people I did know, to say, first of all, Rabbi Spitzer isn't inhospitable. He is genuine. To say, listen to the marginalized voice. And also to say, a Reform Jew that I don't know chimed in to say, I'm a Reform Jew and this also makes me uncomfortable. An unaffiliated Jew chimed in to say, I'm unaffiliated and this also makes me uncomfortable. It's not just the right-wing conservative people, not that I think we are right-wing, but that seems to be how I was being presented. And I was reminded about what it means to be a Nachshon, what it means to take that first step into the sea, what it means to stand up and say, no, this is meaningful. This is a meaningful and serious part of our tradition. We have to be a part of that redemption. Shabbat Shalom.